Okay, well, this is going to be my last video about affective reasons to believe in something beyond what we have in the here and now. And again, however this ends up, there's probably going to be some kind of weird eye contact going on because I have three different cameras filming me right now. I don't know which one of them is going to turn out to have the best result. I'm still experimenting with this technology. It's really a challenge. Um, I want to start out in this wrap up by talking about the kind of experience that I have not even mentioned up until now. And some of you may be wondering, well, why not? This is what I expected you to talk about. First of all, if you talk about emotional reasons to have religious faith, this would be first up to the plate, right? Experiences of something supernatural like an angel speaking to you or the voice of God talking to you after you've been praying. I've known of many people who have said to me that they've had experiences like this, and I do not by any means intend to suggest in anything that I will say that I'm disparaging or laughing at those experiences. Uh, my objection to them is that they have no objectivity. They're not something that you can really share with somebody else and expect to bring that person on board to share your faith with that other person. I had an excellent example of this in the past summer. A woman was talking to several of us about uh, a terrible, really tragic night that she had in the hospital. I don't know if this was her grandchild or her niece, but it was a child who was in great danger. And the woman was at one of these windows where you can see the doctors working on the patient. And I guess she had a chair or something where she could sit down and try to sleep. Obviously, not much sleeping goes on in those circumstances, but she just had a miserable ordeal of it. And at some point in the morning or the wee hours of the night, I guess the doctors are probably finished by this point, but she went and stood at that window and looked in. And she says that an angel told her that everything was going to be all right. And that was an experience that's always stayed with her. It's what you might call sui generis. It was not like anything else she'd ever experienced before. So she was certain that it was an authentic spiritual encounter. Now, the child died, unfortunately, but I credit this woman all the more with having a genuine kind of religious experience because to her, the encounter made the passing of the child okay. I mean, that's what you would expect an angel to say, isn't it? We're all going to die someday in this world, in the flesh. The promise of faith is that the life of the Spirit goes on. So her faith was not crushed when the child was lost uh, in this world. Her faith that the child continued into eternity was enhanced by this encounter. And that's wonderful and powerful. And I am certain that that woman believed in that lock, stock, and barrel. That was obviously an intense, very real experience to her. But how do you share that experience with somebody else? It's you can't really fault another person for saying, well, she was exhausted. Maybe she'd spent 2 or 3 nights without sleep, or in her woozy state, she may just have imagined this. The neurons were playing tricks with her. Some people talk about music or an artistic experience as having this uplifting quality. Um, some people, of course, if we stand in front of the Grand Canyon and we see that sublime, magnificent work of nature opening up before us, most of us will think of something magnificent and beyond this world as having a hand in that. Well, those are experiences, though, the artistic or the sublime, those are things that have an object related to them that other people can perceive and buy into. But when you talk about something that's as personal as an angel speaking to you, you can't really expect other people to relate to that. They just have to. Maybe they know you and they trust that this was really genuine. But don't don't fault other people if they are not won over by that, because you're not really sharing anything with them that they can uh, grapple with their perceptions or their mind. And please also don't think that uh, those of us who haven't had an experience like that, I don't hear voices in the night where God is telling me what to do. Don't think that people like us are excluded from God's kingdom. Don't be saying, well, you would know what that experience is like if you were one of the chosen. Obviously, God doesn't want anything to do with you because there's just something wrong with you. You're out. That is what the ancients would have called the Gnostic heresy. That's suggesting that the circle of the faithful is kind of a secret club, and you're either admitted or you're not. And the whole thing's a big mystery, and the Christian faith is not at all. So that's why this is called a heresy. It's open to everybody. Uh, if you're excluding other people from the faith because they haven't had this special experience that you've had, then I don't know that this is really the Christian God that's communicating with you. I mean, maybe I don't speak to God and know his voice, but I know his grammar and I know his style, and I know that that's not the sort of message that God all good would deliver. I just happened to be serendipitously looking at the second book of Colossians. I guess this is long about this 17th, 18th verse here, where Paul warns against people who are communicating with angels trying to claim some kind of higher authority. So again, I admire this woman and I respect her, and I think her experience was probably very real for her, but it's not something that I'm going to offer in these videos as a genuine experience that we can all share in. It isn't. A couple of other points that I want to draw from my previous video about moral imperatives and try to wrap up here real quickly. One thing, the idea of conscience being a voice of God, this is something that a lot of Christians and even the Jewish commentator Dennis Prager, a lot of you who watch YouTube will have seen videos at Prager University, that, as he calls it. Dennis Prager, for instance, makes this case that conscience misleads us. A lot of people say, well, my conscience told me to do it, and that's the voice of God, so it must have been the right thing to do. I want to just stress there again that what people mistake for conscience is often their social conditioning. They can be doing something that they're pretty sure is wrong, but they're going to tell themselves that it's the voice of conscience to try to convince themselves that it's right. And you know what? I didn't say this in the earlier video, but people perversely will even repeat things that they know are wrong in order to condition themselves to believe that they're not so wrong. I think this had something to do with why the Aztecs kept performing that horrible ritual of human sacrifice that involved cutting the living heart out of little girls. And they did this thousands of times. How could they keep repeating it? Well, I think that the objective there was to do it so many times that you're actually taking the conscience, as it were, and throttling it. Conscience, shut up. I want you to stop telling me this is bad. This is what our people have been doing, and surely we haven't been doing a wicked practice, so I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to do it so much that I get used to it, and suddenly the conscience is not talking to me anymore, so I guess it's okay. Human beings are very perverse in that manner. And I don't think at all that disqualifies conscience as a voice of authority. I think it, inverse sort of way it proves it. I was going to say one more thing about conscience here that I didn't write down, and now my mind is kind of spinning. I think that the conscience, yes, we can be misled by our conscience, but I know what I was going to. Dennis Prager, this is such a good point to build upon. He was talking about the Torah and specifically about Genesis. In this video, he was talking about how there's a difference between murder and killing, and the commandment in Genesis is thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill. And this would be, typical of people who tell us that conscience is not an adequate authority, that we need scripture or we need revelation. We need something from the outside to save us from the misguidance that our conscience can give us. And I would just make this point very quickly because I am running out of time, but I would want to say to Dr. Prager, how do you know what the dividing line is between kill and murder? Obviously, if you're killing someone in self-defense, or if you're fighting against raiders upon your village who are there to enslave and pillage, then that's not murder. But what if you capture some of the raiders and you drive away the others? And then the problem becomes, what do I do with these captives? They were trying to kill us, so shouldn't we kill them? If we let them go or ransom them back, then they'll probably be back here tomorrow trying to murder us and slay us. So if we execute them, is that murder or killing? Does the Torah cover that? Does the Bible tell us? What if we have some guys in that bunch of captives that we know are pretty bad actors and they're just going to be nothing but trouble in the future, but we have others that maybe are scarcely more than children, and we know they've been culturally conditioned. This is why they're here. This is why they're raping and plundering, because they don't really know any better, and they still have, there are possibilities for these young boys. So we're going to keep them, under surveillance for a couple of years, and we're going to try to bring them up to be good people. Well, do you think the Bible always has passages that explain the shading between kill and murder, for instance? Do you think that all of those fine distinctions are parsed somewhere in the text? Or do you think that we can only read the text successfully and apply it to our lives because there's something in us that alerts us to those fine distinctions? I would say the latter. In fact, I would say that it's impossible, even if you're a scholar and an authority on sacred writ, as Dennis Prager is, and of course most of us are not to the extent that he is, but even if you have that degree of authority, you're going to come to the point where the specific occasion is not covered by anything that's explicitly written out in the holy document. And you're going to have to use some kind of inner enlightenment. If you don't want to call it conscience, then call it inner revelation or something else. But there has to be something that comes from within, and it's a feeling, and it's a feeling of higher authority than you get from your culture or from your personal whimsy. It's I would say again and finally that it's the voice of God, and it's not a private little voice whispering to us in the night when nobody else can hear it. It's a voice that speaks very loudly, and it's accessible to anyone with an ear. He who hath an ear, let him hear.